I think so. I think you're right. And it's fascinating to watch that happen before our eyes, basically over the last decade or so, and just that transformation. What do you think? I mean, what do you think has led to that? What's maybe one of the key catalysts that you think's led to that?
Well, look, I'm a big fan of this brand, Black Craft, out of just what is that, Anaheim-ish, Orange County. Uh, just kind of like just doing dark metal type wear, and one of their sweatshirts that I have says, "You keep praying, I'll keep evolving." Right. The reality is we have to evolve, and we have to evolve our spirituality. This has no, I'm speaking, I guess, directly about religion, right? And praying, I think, as we define it now, is outside. It's putting responsibility outside, as opposed to meditation, which is gaining more popularity, which is about communing with oneself, right? This notion that an empty vessel fills no cups is exactly right. If we think of everything as outside responsibility, are empty vessels waiting to be filled, when instead we could be the filled vessels that go out and nourish the world, right? I think that simple, well, not so simple. I think that evolution of spirituality is what we're seeing. I think that mainstream religion is in conflict now, and you can see that playing out geopolitically, not just only here in the nation, but around the world, where there are folks who want to keep it like the same, but most of us are naturally evolving. Our access to information, right? Our access to being able to put things together and realize the commonality of all is a truth that just can't be hidden by these invisible borders, right? It's just kind of getting a little bit like, when you hear people say like globalist or I think it's getting harder, and I'm a patriot, but I think it's getting harder and harder to think of ourselves as not part of this world, right? It's like we're too interconnected to just be like, I'm just about my neighborhood, right? And yes, I think the internet creates these digital neighborhoods, but we still have an awareness of now the world, because some of my values may not even be shared with my partners in my city, state, nation. They may be worldwide, right? That individual tailoring of everything, its natural progression, I think, leads us away from the kind of things that would put us all in a box. Let me put it like that. So I think that's where then when you think about mind opening, you think about calming the body and elevating the mind. Of course, you have cannabis, you have psilocybin. You see the rise of the use of things, the abandoning of alcohol, which dulls the senses and doesn't force us to ask questions, right? Our social paradigm, like I'm obsessed with cannabis lounges and where that's going to go, right? Because we're just at the tip of the iceberg. We haven't even started to understand how we're going to really accept this abundance of this plant into our everyday lives. But already we see Americans are stepping back from alcohol. I think that'll happen worldwide. And what happens when instead of going into a bar where people are just numb and drinking their problems away to just be boisterous, but not really think about their role in their problems, to a place where it's that classic stoner meme where it's like quiet and everybody's just chilling. I think it's a different mindfulness that is so needed right now and so truthful once you experience it, that more and more of us are evolving that way. But anyway, I'll pause. I could go on because it's like there's no straight answer. It's just you said, how is that happening? It's interwoven.
That was the answer that I wanted. That's awesome. I have been really contemplating and meditating on this notion, and just that this idea that we are creator and we are co-creating with all living beings, and just this incredible kind of nature of time, right? And this playing with this idea that time is just something that we created. Time doesn't The only reason time exists, or that the year we're in 2024, the only reason that the year 2024 exists as we conceive it is because we created that. Otherwise, and I've, in contemplating this, you boil it down, and something that you mentioned like triggered that of, otherwise we're just becoming aware, right? The past exists because we're consciously thinking of it, and every seemingly every second or every minute that goes by, we're just becoming aware of someone that's interacting with us or becoming aware of something happening in the world. And that level of awareness is evolving to such a great extent worldwide that, again, it makes me think back to, man, what was the level of awareness 300 years ago? The level of awareness and someone's world was so confined seemingly, or maybe it wasn't. Maybe the imagination was such that it led to the creation of what we now know, and the awareness that we now know. And so that's, yeah, I loved your answer because it's a lot of that I've been contemplating a lot lately. Cool.
Yeah, no, it's funny the time thing. I because I can go down the rabbit hole. I've taken exception with just even the calendar, right? So I just happen to be personally not a religious person, and seeing the potential rise of theocracy, Christian nationalism rearing its ugly head, just like straight, like you don't have to be a historian to just know that that is not the right way. But yet we see it rising at the same time that we see these other forces of consciousness rising. And like, yeah, to me it's like there is there's a this thing happening. And like one of my favorite bands is this Swedish band Ghost, and they have a song Year Zero, and it always resonates with me because like, yeah, I feel like we may not get the change that is really needed until we reset the calendar and start thinking objectively about time from a science based, from a what we know based and what we may not know based, as opposed to mythology. Like that's probably the most polite way to put it.
Yeah, I feel you on that. Um, yeah, wow. Well, this is going to be great. We I had us recording, and typically on these, I'll just kind of, where I like to usually start is kind of at a beginning point, and um, again, you're so free to share, any experience or experiences here today. I would love to, maybe start like at the beginning, and some, and if it's with cannabis, like some impactful experience. Maybe it's the first time that you smoked cannabis, or that you were consuming, and what that experience is like. Or maybe it was an experience that was super impactful and just kind of changed your perception of reality, that set you on a certain path. Or could be a blend of both. But yeah, and also just a intro to the to the reality sandwich community. I'm here chatting with Guy Ricoeur, and he's just a legend in the cannabis space here in California and in Humboldt. Um, and yeah, we're incredibly blessed to have him on the platform and just get some of his experience, and also, as we know now, words of wisdom.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, for sure. Sorry, I love to ramble, so I just dive right in. But yeah, look, I think for me, my cannabis eyes were opened, and in a way, my eyes and my consciousness, I guess, were open. Luckily, uh, because I, believe it or not, was a little bit more conservative and may have progressed to be more conservative. But I grew up, in the 80s during Reagan, right? Um, and like many people who saw Top Gun thought I was going to go into the Navy and fly jets, and I did enlist. And I knew before as I enlisted that I was going to get an ROTC scholarship, but I had to go to a program called Boost, Broaden Opportunity for Officer Selection and Training. And like, yeah, leaving New York City, going to boot camp, was pretty interesting. But prior to that, in high school, I had tried cannabis, but you know how they say you don't really get high the first time? Like, yeah, I don't remember like experiencing high. We also did lots of nitrous and stupid shit like that and drank. But I remember going to see Def Leppard, Pink Floyd, Guns N' Roses, shit like that. And then later in high school, I was never straight edge, but I was really big on the punk rock scene in the Lower East Side. And so drugs just were, there was straight edge as a concept, right? And while I wouldn't consider myself that, it's not like I was actively seeking out cannabis or any other recreational drugs outside of beer. And cigarettes, of course. We all smoked back then. Um, I joined the service. I get my ROTC scholarship, and I go to a technical school, which I now realize how conservative it was, but I didn't think of it. Rochester Institute of Technology in upstate New York. And I joined a fraternity for architects, scientists, and engineers, of all things. I'm a physics major. I think I'm going back nuke power. It's the Cold War, remember, right? Like, so it's like there's a reason to join. Patriotism is different then, right? Um, in this group, there's a subgroup in my fraternity triangle, known as the Falcons, and they are the pot smokers. And of course, I fall into this group. I fit like a glove. And yeah, I proceed to learn how to really smoke weed, or begin to learn how to smoke weed. I think that's when I start to have a turning point. Of course, I'm introduced to psilocybin and LSD. It's not long that the Cold War ends. And of course, I change from physics to film and become just much more of an artist in thought and mind. And yeah, all of a sudden, I now have a house where a doctor from U of R is grow that used to go to RIT is growing clones up on top of our uh, like our attic area, because he didn't trust us with the plants. And I'm getting a first insight into how the ladies are made, but also getting bags of weed for doing that. And back then it was that old thing, like you buy an ounce, you sell 3 of them, and you get a free quarter, right? You you scale that, and you smoke some, and you sell extra, and there's money to be made. And so yeah, that all of a sudden I'm understanding the weed game. I tried growing my first plants in those first years in college and whatnot. And by the time I graduate, I graduate with a film degree. I get down to New York. I start working. I become an assistant director. I work my way up into the DGA. And on that arc, cannabis is there, right? All along the way, just building. And by the time I get my job at Paramount, right before I'm like 30 something, and I get to LA in 1998, I guess. Yeah, I'm like, I give a fuck. I've been CIA, deep background checked. I was on submarines at one point during my service career. Um, I don't really care about getting a script. I'm in dispensaries. Of course, I was working with Montel Williams by that time, and so I was his caregiver. He's co-signing for me in dispensaries early on, and then at one point, I have this place, and I have two. I decided to try 2 lights in a back room, and I meet my partner, my longtime growing partner, Alex. He has Crohn's disease, and between his disease and Montel's MS and our advocacy work, I'm just learning a lot about the plant and how it works. And so he starts watching my plants, because he, interestingly enough, is doesn't want to get a script. So I'm like buying products for him and this. But before we know it, 2 lights become 4 lights, become that period where we're able to get homes with no doc loans. And between my experience on subs and trying to have good environmental technology to not only keep smell in, but keep tight environmental controls all the way down to the diff between nighttime and daytime. And Alex's electrical engineering skills, yeah, we were building like a smart home before it was a smart home, with not only just full automation for the ladies, but security automation, right? And like this understanding that like there's no way anybody's ever going to be able to tell this is a grow house, right? Like safety and stuff. So yeah, I mean, that's my short but not so short through line into cannabis. And then, of course, from there, it's cultivating, it's getting more into the LA scene. Yeah, and then eventually starting my first compliant company in Colorado in 2012, vape pen company. And like most people, ready to race to the bottom. Like, yeah, I get the prohibition mindset that a lot of people are under right now, distillate, super potency. It's a prohibition hangover. When you're in the game as long as I am, you realize, oh, no, wait, that's what we thought we needed. That's what we thought we wanted. But the reality is we want good weed to smoke. It doesn't need to be like 30%. It needs to taste good. It needs to come in a variety of flavors, and people need to keep pollen chucking. It needs to be 90-day long strains that we pay for more for. And all the products that come from that should come from the plant and be clean and solventless, just like we want our food. So I know a lot of folks, that's not the industry we have now, but that is the industry that's coming. That's that ultimate truth of like, oh, wait, this is what cannabis is. And just because everybody else hasn't gotten it and they're trying to make it beverages and they're trying to do all these things, yeah, let's go through that arc. Hopefully it won't take forever. I've heard, I was a judge in the Army Cup, I had 10 years. No. I'm going to push it. I'm going to shove education down our throats a little faster than that. Everybody needs to get their weed game up, and hopefully we'll get. Yeah, I'm working with some folks in New York where it looks like we'll be able to get single use distribution of products, right? So you can really come to a social environment, get served a dab, and yeah, we're going to figure out how we get it into media. I'm obsessed with that. Like, every movie you watch, whether they're happy or sad, there's always a drawer to be opened where they can pull out a bottle of scotch, and it's like, what? Not that I like drinking, but it's a fucking killer of all things to be normalized. So how do we start to model for Americans in the world when it's time to pull that weed out, right? And what that
Yeah,
means in the social context. So
that's
we'll
a good point. So I do have probably like 8 or 9 questions circling through my head, but I won't be able to think of any of them until I circle back and ask you whatever you could tell me. What's it like being on a submarine? What's that experience like?
I was on a 688 class sub, and it was as tall as you could be on it. A 688 class is a sub hunter, so while it's nuclear powered, it doesn't carry nuclear weapons. And yeah, this was straight up during the Cold War. I took a brand new boat called the USS Miami, which is being decommissioned now, and that just made me feel old. Um, and it was built in Groton, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. Right, so I picked it up right when it was doing this thing called post shakedown evaluation, where they take new boats out and they put it through the paces and all this. It happened that was also during, like, I think it was Hurricane Andrew, and so it was pretty interesting to experience serious sea state and then go down below depth and feel nothing and just be doing like playing with the storm basically and understanding how the boat works with it. It's interesting. It's like back then, like I said, we all smoked cigarettes, and there are folks like once you're in that bubble, I think there's an awareness that there is no escape, right? Like there is an escape hatch. There's this thing called the stanky hood that you're supposed to put on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you were
so
saying you put
yeah,
something
so
on.
so I spent about 60 days at sea, and folks will tell you like everything about their marriage. It's just you're just become this tight knit family. The food is great. It's only like 128 sailors, 4 meals a day. Back then we had Game Boy, and you can watch flicks. After a certain period of time in the mess, it's very tight, but you make your way, right? You can go up to the fan room where allegedly people smoked. But then you do have duties like scraping like tar because everybody smoked, right? Like if the smoking lamp was on when they burn. So the way it works, if I remember correctly, is there are these scrubbers that are constantly scrubbing the air, but it is the same air. That part, if you think about it, can be a little gross, right? And then they burn O2 candles, phosphorus, I think, that release fresh oxygen into the air, right? When they're doing that, you can't smoke, right? But and it's like there's a smoking lamp, and it's the military. Unlike civilians, it's like when they say something, like people fucking take it seriously because
Oh
it's
yeah,
like it could
yeah.
be critical. So yeah, those are the kinds of things I remember. I definitely slept in a coffin rack, and the boat is so efficient that when you go into the berthing areas, there are 3 racks, top, middle. I believe I had a middle rack I think I switched a couple times. But inside of every rack are compartments, and they're not yours. You have what's under your bed. And it's possible, it doesn't always happen, but it's definitely happened to me, where there's something in that container when you happen to be off and trying to sleep, and some random sailor is just going to open your bunk and reach across you, open a hatch, and pull out like toilet paper or Tide or, some shit like that. And it's like, what? Or never dull to go polish some brass because that's where it was stowed for whatever reasons. Um, so yeah, it's submarine life. A lot of respect for those folks, dude. It's like yeah, I don't know that I could have ever done. No, I could have done long tours on it. And then, interestingly enough, when I started working with Montel, he was on submarines and was a cryptologist. And he's a little older than me, so he was really into it and was on subs where they would put men in the water to like tap Russian lines. Like the Cold War was for real. And like I'm very blessed that I only had to be at the tail end of it, you know. But we were definitely worried about the Soviet Union. Like it was a thing. There was a through line to the military, and even when I left and uh, disenrolled without disenrolled upon request, I think it was called during when Clinton was downsizing. I literally thought, well, we won. Like we had the biggest stick. There is no Soviet Union, peace on earth. I didn't understand enough about the other geopolitical things throughout the Middle East, but it's been perpetual war since then. Like one of my
Mhm.
cousins is like retired, works for the DOJ. He's that dude that makes a bunch of money because he just worked 20 years and then moved on, right? Like he made chief and did something, but it's not super specific and is still making like hundreds of thousands of dollars now for the DOJ, right? And I'm like, I at one point, believe it or not, I was obsessed with having my own flag. Like, think about all these things that are happening around the Constitution and Congress and stuff. When I tell you those fools are idiots, it's ridiculous because I don't know if you know this, but officers in the military are empowered by the U.S. Constitution. They're separate kind of citizens, right? That are clearly defined. So we all have a good idea of what the Constitution is and what it means. That's why I never worry about the military, right? They must just be like rolling in their graves, right? And it's like the Constitution is a very fixed and clear document in many ways. And when you are an admiral, you get your own flag with the star, right? That flies alongside. For a long time, I was obsessed with having my own flag, And I think I could have done it if I had stayed in the military. But I literally thought, peace on earth. You know what I mean? It's cool. But
Yep.
I was
Yep.
wrong. We've been in literally endless wars since then. But it wasn't official. And I feel bad. I don't know if you know what's going on with the VA. It's getting smaller and smaller because, or VFW, I should say, like those halls are closing because they don't consider a lot of the last excursions or operations that we've been in as wars, and they don't get the same benefits package. The U.S. government definitely can pull the sleight of hand, man.
Hmm. I recently was blessed and privileged with the opportunity to go on one of the big aircraft carriers. Is the Carl St. Vincent, and man, I'm I'm a tall guy. I know you're a big guy too. Every For this massive city of a ship, everywhere, if it's not outside, everywhere except for the air hangar, the plane hangar, you're like,
Yep.
ducking in
Stepping
through
through
there.
hatches,
I'm
constantly
like
stepping through
this.
hatches.
I feel like I'm trapped. I'm like I would, it's cool, like cool, fun to cruise through for a couple hours and be blessed with that. But I'm like I would never make it on here. I would be losing my damn mind.
Yep.
But
Carriers are an
that is
amazing,
crazy.
amazing, amazing invention, dude. And yeah, every bit of that ship is like, yeah, there is no, it's not like being on a cruise ship. Like if it can be tighter, like I
Yep.
guess it's, when you think about civilian things, there's a certain level of safety that's built in for the idiot factor that I don't know when that gets eliminated. Well, I do. It's like the stages because most of those sailors on the boat have not only been through boot camp, they've
Right.
also probably been through at least one or two A schools, and by the time they're deployed, yeah, they just have at the very least some good situational awareness around them, and safety is your personal responsibility, not the man's.
Yep.
And every sailor has to keep themselves and thereby their fellow sailor safe. Otherwise, that
Yep.
shit would not work.
All right. Well, I'm glad we got the sub story. Now I feel like I can think a lot clearer.
Okay.
um, let's see. Um, so there's I want to get your thoughts on just kind of like the experience of like your relationship with cannabis and your experience with that, maybe again kind of based on the timeline that you were sharing earlier, from when it became like, hey, this is a real part of my life. How did that relationship with the plant kind of evolve and grow, and how would you kind of put maybe some like stages or phases on that to where, maybe up to where you are today, and then again, like, today, do you see it as, it's just a part of life? It's, do you see it as medicine? I mean, right? It's part of this like breaking the stigma of, let's not call it a drug. Like what do we, to you, what was it back then? And then how did it evolve, and what is it to you now?
Yeah. So still evolving, I think, is the first thing to just be said. Respect. It's like I want, like I have a good vision for the future, but I want cannabis to impact us I'm shooting for the stars, and we'll see where we land in terms of what I think this is what's going to happen, right? In terms of like how it evolved, right? So if we go back to 2000, let's say, right? Um, I love cannabis, and I'm really getting a like view of how it works for folks with autoimmune diseases, and starting to understand how the ECS brings homeostasis and regulate. I'm just blessed. It's all about right place, right time. I get to go to Sweden to the Karolinska Institute to see them put probes on Montel's like brain and like feet, to see them like run electrical charges and see that where the degradation is, there's like a signal lag, right? Now, of course, they didn't want him to do this. He did it. I have to give him props. Then goes in the next day about as high as he can be, and sees if there's a measurable difference, right? And so I'm getting this like courtside seat to cannabis and autoimmune diseases. I'm starting to cultivate and just play and grow buds. And, I'll admit that the first buds I ever shared with my collective, as we did under the 215 way, were probably mids best, right? You know? But yeah, I start to like really develop a passion for cultivating awesome plants, first for Montel and for Alex, and just understanding that. But yeah, at one point, there's also, you've heard, I think this is how we started the conversation. I somehow in college became a little bit more green. I think some people might say woke or liberal or some of those words compared to the person that we were just talking about that was in the military, right? And I realized, sitting on the Paramount lot, Sumner Redstone is aggregating all media, and that just doesn't, something is wrong, right? Like, it's like there is something happening right there in 2000 that I was like, what? Hollywood is just, and content and how it's distributed and not distributed was starting to like open my eyes to be like, wait a minute, there's a game being played here. And unlike New York, where I was my only friend, like I was the only person in my friend group that worked as in film. In Hollywood, it's like a steel town. Everybody, it's like it's everywhere. So I started to feel a little bit weird. And like when my contract was up, this is 2001, going to 2001. I made a choice right then and there. I had converted the first place. Alex and I, we had maybe 8 lights burning, right? I had started to get down with, back then, what were the groups? ASA was big. NCIA was starting. There was there were Los Angeles Patients Caregivers. It was one of the first dispensaries right there. So we had these little dispensaries. We're doing little things, little events, and I'm like, this thing could break. I'm like, this could be the thing, right? Like I'm into this, and so I decide to take a break, not renew with Paramount, right? Right around the same time I met my wife, actually, and we decide to open up our second place, grow house, and uh, all of a sudden it becomes a lot of lights. I mean, all of a sudden it's like the yield, and back then, folks are getting 6,000 a unit. The economics become quite interesting. I'll put it that way. I mean, I'll cop to the outlaw thing. I mean, I often say that like an outlaw is a person that stands outside the law because they believe it's unjust, whereas a criminal is just an opportunistic. Yes, was there opportunity? That's undeniable. Did I feel what I was doing was 100% the right thing for the people that were getting it, and for you and for humanity in terms of the projected vision? Like, I always have to, again, give Montel credit. It was like, I worked with Montel for almost 11 years, and we normalized cannabis in our lives and around his kids and everything. And it's like, I knew that this was going to be game changing to the chill of the world. I just, it just takes time. And so, yeah, I definitely, I think as soon as I left my contract with Paramount and opened up the first grow house, the economics became quite obvious. And growing cannabis, while definitely an art, respect to outdoor growers, indoors is a lot of science, and in some ways not that hard. And if you're growing a genetic like the ones we grew back then, like Bubba Kush, you know what I mean? OG's got a little bit more complicated, but the cushions just yield. The dreams. There was a time where the dreams were big, just yielding, right? And like, yeah, good HPS. I mean, I think the hardest things are making sure you can get 400 amp service without, raising an eyebrow, knowing how to like gate going to pay your electricity bill in cash at different places and not drawing attention to yourself. Like the safety protocols were probably where we obsessed the most, right? And then eventually getting the right middleman, because it's like at one point you just, and I got to shout out Sparky Wilson Rose here for like, you can't just keep going, or maybe that was Bob. Like you just can't go to dispensaries like daily and always be caught up in them trying to throw QPs for 1,200 a unit, right? You gotta start to move bigger packs. I do remember my first 5 pack. I remember my first 10 pack. You know, um, yeah. So I'm sorry, I'm just rambling about my experience in cannabis, and like, yeah, I evolved into it, right? And so the economic portion, the distro portion became, you get caught up, like it just becomes your thing and your lifestyle, and it's like, and it pays and it's great. And like I always tell people that like, even though right now I'll always put it down for sun grown, I put my oldest, went to school and everything, like lived, a great life. And that's the only economic source she knew. And same thing with my youngest. It just happens that compliance happened on her watch. You know what I mean? So yeah, the ladies have been employing me for quite some time. And yeah, and the advocacy, at one point it was just like, I don't like being lied to, right? And then you start questioning a little bit. That's that counterculture. And the more you question, the more you feel weird. But sometimes I look at myself, like I look at these like Mennonite communities, I'm like, oh, they have these strict, rigid guidelines and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I just don't. I'm being dismissive of their why, of the why of their rigid guidelines, but I also have rigid guidelines now, because like you start questioning. The beauty of cannabis is you start questioning, you start wondering like, oh, whether it's from processed foods to uh, you know uh, pills, like, really, we know now that doctors should, the first thing they should say is diet and exercise instead of a pill, right? Like, the wellness for profit culture, you just start asking all these questions. And yeah, I think I definitely, now when I say it like that, it just occurred to me, it's like, fuck, I do put some rules. I don't just do it like everybody else does, right? But I've never had to. That's the beauty of counterculture and being an outlaw for a while.
For you personally, what is your favorite way for consuming cannabis? Do you like joints? Do something else?
100% joints. So I don't know if Kyle shared with you, but as Pop and Barkley transitions, I'm gonna be launching a brand, and I'm going after that 20%. Those who are already at least close to normalizing, right? Because I don't believe they're being served. They're being served maybe by the trap, some would say, but we need to culturally evolve, and they need to be the thought leaders. I need to provide products for them. So I've been getting into, I understand the pre-roll craze. I get it, right? And I love convenience. I buy pre-rolls. I got the Canada. That's what I did, right? I also bought some flour, organic, but not sun-grown. But anyway, um, I want to put out Canagars, like some larger format, because I believe abundance is coming to us, right? So our rituals need to change. When I see farmers sitting on weed, I'm like, oh yeah, that's because we're overgrown. But it's also like there are people still holding in their weed smoke, right? It's like, no, we need to get our game up. It's a plant. It's giving us abundance. And while there's a lot of things in our legacy tradition I want to hold on to, there's some things that we can grow out of, right? And even though I still keep my roaches, maybe I shouldn't. I wouldn't do that with cigarettes, right? Some things should be good on the relight. So, yes, joints 100% is what I'm driving at. I am trying to get into slightly larger. I don't have slightly larger format joints, more like cigarillo size is what I've been rolling. Like just
Nice.
fatties, just more aeration. And so I want to find that perfect, like kind of cigarillo shot style for when we launch. I've pretty much moved away from bong hits and glass simply because I'm lazy. I get like a good clean bong hit if it's clean water and clean glass, but I'm obsessed about that. And that's from snobbery from years ago. So, you were asking about how it's evolved, right? There was a time where we did use bongs, and I would be offended if you gave me a dirty bong, the same way that if you came to my spot, there'd be good glass and all that kind of stuff. We did that. I love glass and dab culture, and I do dab. And love hash. I mean, and of course, with the new brand, hash will lead the way, right? We're gonna make awesome hash like Papa Select. I'm determined. It's all about the trichome. Like to me, I should have led with that, right? It's all about the trichome. Smoking is still my favorite way, right? But dabbing is right there, especially since the shout out to all the device makers for making it so much easier, right? Like at this point, I don't torch. I don't use a torch at all. Although if somebody wants to serve me a dab, I love it, right? I do think just like the ritual of serving alcohol, there is something when somebody warms up a banger, especially if they're really nerdy about it, right? And then pushes it to you right when it's ready, it always seems to taste better, my opinion.
Let me
I
tell
never,
you, I
or
have one of
I'm
those
just not
friends, and
skilled at it and I never get it right. But
you're
that being
100%
said,
right.
whether it's iSpy or Puff Go, all the new up and coming devices, yeah, I always have concentrates, right? I like, yeah, love that. I don't know about hash holes and infused joints. I'm really struggling, right? Because part of me is also starting to feel like the obsession with potency has got to stop. It's not what we do in the beverage game. You don't walk into a bar or a Bevmo and say, "Give me moonshine." You want something that's delicious. It could be strong, but the whole idea is to have a bunch with the homies, right? The notion of the one hit wonder, I'm not even sure where that ever came from, right? I think if we're right now, we could be sitting smoking and enjoying it and maybe having another one, right? Not looking for something that's so strong that it just sends us too far within. Let me put it that way,
Right.
right? So yeah, but joints first and foremost. So yeah, I don't know if you can see this, but this is like something like around this size. Uh, is what I've been liking these days, and that's some. My wife, for some reason, insisted that I not bring cannabis this trip. I usually move around, but I heeded her warning. Uh, and I just bought some weed for here locally in Canada, and interesting. It's just completely different, and no, due respect to the Canadians. And I know, look, when I was another part of the story of the evolution is when I worked with Montel for 10 years. I had introduced him to snowboarding, which was my outlet when I was a young filmmaker, and we would go to Whistler a lot. And that's when I first got introduced to the blueberries and all the fruity fruit strains that they have up here. So respect to Canadian weed. That being said, what's in the dispensary is mids. Because I walk in first, I say sun grown. The guy like, what? What do you mean sun grown? Right? Then I'm like, all right, well, what else do you have? And then he's like, we have these organic things that are grown in living soil. I was like, all right, that's a start. Let's start talking about that, right? And then he hits me with, well, it's not really broken up that way. It's broken up sativa indica hybrid. And I'm like, okay, let me readdress this and let me look at the menu. And then I just ordered a couple of like quarters of some weed, and I felt really bad because I had just come off of judging the Emerald Cup, like with true trichome production, like
Oh yeah.
velvety nugs on the indoor, on the sun grown, just like an awesome black, deep dark green, like just good weed, right? And the mids, like just dusty, like not, yeah. Respect to Canada, but the super grows, the indoor grows, it's like the game needs to be risen a lot. And now, if we were in BC, I'm sure I'm also, I should say, in Manitoba, Winnipeg, which is like in the prairies. It's like the equivalent of being in a big city in the Midwest. So it's not like it's Vancouver or Toronto or something like that.
Mhm. So
I'm
what's
sure those guys have good weed.
what is your go-to strain, or your top three strains that you'll always look for? For me, it's super lemon haze. If I see super lemon haze, like that, and then
Yeah,
give me
yeah,
more of it.
yeah. So we're right. If Alec from SC Labs here, we're here. I'd say we're right there in the Asamine Pininoline family. I go for the wreck, train wreck, and its derivatives all day long. UK cheese and cheeses, which are right in there. And then on the softer side, like things like forbidden fruit, like those dark forbidden fruit type colors, type flavors. And touching on the Rex and whatnot, that's another thing so one of the things I hope to do with the brand is one, bring seasonality back into the conversation, right? So we get flowers now at dispensaries, and I think most of the people that are coming in, the dispensaries are not educating. Nobody's bothering to say like, oh, this is full term, right? And of course, full term implies sun grown, right? So of course, it's because indoor weed still has this shine, like it's better. I won't dive down the rabbit hole. Well, we will maybe. I'm sure you'll ask me that question, that indoor v sun grown question. But in general, I think that understanding that there is a fall harvest, a spring depth, and a summer depth, and what the difference in those buds is super important, right? So bringing that seasonality back into the game would be really, really, really like harkening back to plant medicine for folks, like, oh yeah, this is a plant, this is when it grows and why. So yeah, I hope to infuse that notion of the brand. So anyway, go on. I like rambled on you again.
No, that was great. I like the cheesy ones too. Give you a little good flavor, a little
Oh
good taste.
yeah, thanks for that's the point I was trying to make, is that in dispensaries right now, what we're not seeing is anything plus a 60-day growth cycle, right? It's been so optimized for
Right.
efficiency that the notion of a long flowering true rec or cheese strain, or those hazes, those lemon hazes, hazes are in that 70 to 80 day, right? And I think once you get into some of those like high end sativas, like those Colombian Gold, like original Colombian Gold, that kind of shit, you're in that 90-day range, right? Um, that's 50% more time and risk to the farmer, and so, of course, they have to charge more. But right now, when you go in, all weed is the same price usually, or around the same price. It's hard to charge 50% more for a particular type. Now, in the trap, you can get it, but we stopped. Even I feel bad that I was part of the people that bred out and bred down for 60 days because we grew indoors and you wanted to flip rooms, right?
Mm,
That's so sometimes, and I apologize to anybody, you'll hear me like just it's been pointed out to me that I will say certain words like distillate and indoor sometimes with a hint of disdain, but I'll just qualify it by saying that, like, I've been there. Like, I'm not trying to be hypocritical. The fact is, there's a reason why we wanted things to be 60 days. We wanted to flip rooms. We had to, right? There's a reason why we grew indoors. We don't have to do either of those things now to make the game work, right? There's a reason why when we first had an opportunity to get short pack distillation machines, rotovaps, we tried to get the strongest, most potent extracts possible. As soon as we could blast BHO in the yard, we did, because it was amazing. And when I came up, if you're fucking uh, extract sparkled, that's how we knew it was BHO and was awesome. And meanwhile, by the time I get to Denver, I'm looking for 0 parts per million in my vac oven while keeping all my delicious terps. As a true practitioner, I could tell you, I will take a gently vac high terp extract over a purged 0 part per million extract. But I'm healthier in other ways, I guess, right? So, point is, yeah, so I've just been there, had the argument about BHO over CO2 and the cleanliness thereof of both, right? Wanted to over refine and distill cannabis, wanted to design and help create, unfortunately, I have to cop to this, some of the grows that I often disparage in Arizona and Nevada, and how you put ACs and BTUs of heat versus BTUs of cooling to make it all work on the environmental control side. But again, because I've worked through that and understand the natural reasons and impetus, I think I feel real qualified to be like, and now we have gotten what we asked for. We have won the prohibition game. They're negotiating their surrender. We should be moving outside and growing at the very least in greenhouses. You want to do mixed light? That's cool. But like when I'm on stage with this dude the other day and he's like, I got a $500,000 a month electric bill, like it's a flex. It's like, no. At one point, we all pay for that. Electricity gets more expensive, and at the very least, Mother Nature suffers. So it's like, let's be the green people we were supposed to be and not let the dollars distract us too much.
right.
Coming from somebody who got distracted by the dollars a little bit, but now it's time to own up and give the gift that this whole movement was about.
Right. So for me, I you know love just like you mentioned, love a clean glass, love when my one homie will torch it up for me, and I am 100% agree with you on that. But if it's me, I call it a cigarette. I'm rolling myself a little cigarette, and I am not a big pre-roll fan. I want to grind. I want to open it. I want to smell. I want all of that part of the ritual. It's every bit of it is in its way meditative. It's this ritual practice that you do, and then throw it there in your paper. And I am not a joint guy, or I'm not a crutch guy either. So I'll, just paper and grass, and it ends up being one of those little like pintails at the very end. So you're pulling it through that little penny. But yeah, it's for me. It's hey, I'm rolling a cigarette, and I'm down to share. But a lot of the time, yeah, it's after hours at night, and you're smoking your cigarette and just reflecting. You're letting the weight of everything that you've been carrying all day, just dropping all of that weight, reflecting, becoming introspective, and really, really getting a different headspace and an outlook on life and reality. And man, I have definitely given credit to cannabis as a plant medicine for really helping me, process things internally, and give me give me my own self therapy, and deal with things, and yeah, and process those things. What is what is that like for you? If you feel comfortable sharing that, is there like a key role that cannabis plays for you, kind of on a personal level? Or is it therapeutic? Is it, do you find it, anything physically healing? Or is it kind of a, what is that, that kind of personal relationship that you have with the plant?
Yeah, it's funny. It's I feel like it's only recently being defined for me because you don't know what you need or yeah, I it's funny, right? Because it's like it's evolved in my life, right? My adult life, right? My formative adult life. And so I think that one, totally agree with what you're saying. The whole meditative aspect of just crafting a smoke, putting it together, and then going out and smoking, and or the whole ritual around it, right? Like I don't want to lose any part of that. And for me, my daily thing now, again, having changed, is like because it's always so busy. I usually don't end up smoking till the afternoon, right? And then it's usually when I'm walking the dog. I live in Humboldt. It's like through the redwoods, and it's always that exact release, right? Prior to that, like when I was cultivating, I used to have to take October off because I just smoked so much. And because I remember quitting cigarettes, I always like to think of myself because you become so introspective at one point that you're growing. Like cannabis grows in mind. We won't get down the rabbit hole of free thinking and why I think it's constantly gets demonized as authoritarian cultures rise. Because yeah, it just causes you to question yourself. If you question yourself, you're questioning the outside, right? So at one point, I'm like, "Fuck, am I addicted? Like, I don't even get high anymore." And like, and I'll always get concerned when I can't discern when I get high, right? So if you're smoking constantly, yeah, you get high maybe the first time you smoke in the day, and after that, you're just smoking. Most newbies don't believe that. They're like, "What?" It's like, yeah, most when you evolve, you'll realize that you can smoke J's during the day, and it's not going to be the end of the fucking world, right? Um, but for me, I think when I was cultivating, it's like you walk in and, we grew in LA. So it was like 6 in the morning, because we'd flower overnight. So you try to get there at 6, have at least 6 hours with the flowering ladies and then maybe a little extra time with the veg. And there's always J's around. So joints in the morning, coffee were just normal. And then I'd realize by the time I get home, when you really should be smoking to like let go and communion with your family, it wasn't really the same hit, right? So I would take a month off, typically in October, to clean up so that by Halloween and my birthday I could get high again, right? Um, yeah, but that's like I was younger then too, and I also drank a lot, so that was like before compliance. So like by 2010, I think by the time I'm making like good BHO, even in LA, like 2009, when we started first seeing skillet hits. I don't know if you remember skillet hits. It was like what preceded like the nails and then the nails and then what we now know as dabbing culture. Um, when we were starting to do that, those concentrates were strong. And I started to like, I mean, oh my God, just get so high. Like, when you're blasting your own BHO from the first time, or, it's like, it's a step up from bubble hash, dude. It's definitely different. Um, yeah, I think I then started to be like, okay, I can't like dab like in the middle of the day. Like that's just not going to work, right? And I think I just also had maturity, right, and more responsibility, and so on. And so now it's just naturally evolved without ever having to like regiment or restrict myself. That I don't typically wake and bake, even when I'm on vacation. Like I don't have like a desire for it, right? I like my coffee, I like my workouts. I don't have a problem working out high, but I don't. It's not for me. I could see others getting into it, and sometimes when it happens, it's amazing. Um, and then yeah, it usually waits till later in the day, and then you smoke, and it's usually like distinct. And then I started thinking more recently, as it became more present to it, I've been thinking about it, using it ritualistically, because uh, to answer, I think, part of the question that you were posing, as I've gotten older, I think we get more spiritual. And my wife introduced me to a gentleman named Dr. Joe Dispenza, who's all about meditation and whatnot. And what attracted me to the work at first was this notion of the placebo effect, right? I've always, with Pop and Bark, I can't even tell you, right? And then even with weed, I'll just tell people straight up. I know, because again, I've been there. If I give you a bag and I tell you it's fire, there's a bigger chance that you are going to have a fire experience than if I say that it's not or it's not. It's just the thing. This thing works on our brain prompts are real. The placebo effect is real. I've seen it in a visceral way with cannabis throughout my career, and with Pop and Barkley, profound. I'm talking about get out of the wheelchair, profound. Hair regrowing, profound. Limbs not needing to be amputated. These are unsolicited, documented stories. Well, at least documented to us stories. All that being said, I would love to, I think, like as a good scientist, any observable phenomenon needs to be understood so that it can be recreated and used at will. I mean, to me, that's one definition of science, right? Observing natural science and trying to game it. We have not done that with the placebo effect, but yet I see the observation, which means the end result we're going for is being able to commune so strongly with our mind that we truly master our body, right? That's live forever type shit. Dr. Joe's work definitely touches on that, right? He definitely goes in a direction that some people might take exception with, but I think at the core of it, it's about deeply reflecting with yourself, having awareness of your physical body. And the beauty of the modern age is we can have great visualization because we've mapped our body in a way that the ancients hadn't, right? And we can truly understand and literally attempt to talk and commune with every part of our body, right? Where does cannabis come into that? I should also just say, to be clear, Dr. Joe's not a cannabis advocate. There's no like if you go to his retreats, they actually want you to be real sober and everything. However, the whole purpose of deep meditation is to calm the body while the mind is aware, right? Let the body completely go. So what does he call it? There's a part of your nervous system that runs your body, You want to shut that down as if you're asleep so that the conscious can be aware and go to work, right? And you have some control of that. I think that in a hectic world, the way we can do that on a regular basis is with a little bit of cannabis, right? And yes, recently, when I smoke, I'm wanting to pay attention so that I can feel that and I can go there, right? And so that first lift, I'm becoming more hyper aware of it in a ritualistic sense. And it's nothing short of transformative, right? It really is. I wish it for everybody, honestly. So yeah, for me, the ritual has evolved, and so one of the other things that I should also give credit to, like Swami and Nikki, a couple years ago when we were judging for the Emerald Cup, we talked about set and setting, right? Again, the cannabis is powerful brain prompt, and like if you really want to honor the contestants, you want to make sure that you are treating all the cannabis in the same set and setting, right? You can't be testing on a day where you just had a spout with your wife and you went out to the garage, right? As opposed to normally smoking in your easy chair or whatever, right? Try to be at that same mindset so you can evaluate it. Because the fact is, the weed you smoke after an argument or in a weird, uncomfortable place is not the weed you smoke in
The brain
a
prompt.
comfortable, safe zone. Yeah, so yeah, so recently I've gotten to just reappreciate the plant and what it can do. I've matured to what it can give me. And perhaps when I was younger, I would have had a completely different answer.
Well, that's awesome. Um, Man, I feel like we should definitely have another conversation on another day about all the things consciousness related that we've been just scratching the surface on.
Yep. Love
That
that.
really excites me. That's honestly what I love to talk about the most, because it's
Yeah. Yeah.
so abstract and there's no wrong answer, and you're just
No, look, I would not, I don't think I would have said it in the same way that I totally saw just from what I gleaned. It's like, you get it, right? There is a deeper level to this human thing. And what frustrates me based on, what we were talking about earlier is that there's just a lot of us that are stuck in a way, and in some ways they're in the way, right? And it's like the same way that I'm like, legalization has given us this, is it wants to give us this gift of abundance, and we're turning it away. Well, late stage capitalism and all the innovation and technology and that arc of innovation that we've gotten to up now also wants to give us a gift of freedom, and most of us are not taking it. Right? So, there are some people that have freed themselves. And of course, because they open themselves, like what Dr. Joe would tell you, is they open themselves to abundance and they get it. And they're digital nomads on a beach doing the job that they love in the place that they love, or they're grinding in the city because that's their thing. But this notion of acceptance of where you want to be and what you want to do, and being the author of your own journey and happiness, and taking that personal responsibility, once you do that, well, then you just make it happen. That's really what it is. It's like, you just make it happen, right? So it's so funny. I just said, so I'm here in Canada with family, right? A lot of older folks and whatnot. And we're just having a conversation. And I go to my wife at one point. I was like, yeah, everything's, I get a question. I'm like, yeah, everything's great. I was like, one thing I can definitely say is all the problems in my life I created, right? I don't have a boss. Like, everything is me. I did it, from the kids to where I live to the job to everything. So I got to live in gratitude 100%. This is 100% my video game and movie, and it's awesome. And others, and I wish that for everybody. I think that could happen for everybody. But there's some things that are keeping folks stuck. Themselves, they have their responsibility, but there's some, we need some consciousness shifts, some societal shifts, some normalizing shifts to encourage folks to free think a little bit more. And I think that scares those who are just about, I don't even know I can't even say power and control, because I don't even understand those things anymore. It's like, they just don't seem as attractive as they used to when I was younger. And I think I see like older people that that seems like what they quest for, but I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I thought all our personal agenda was just to be happy and in gratitude, but it's not. Or maybe that's what we got to teach these folks.
oh man, that's the agenda that we want to tell ourselves. It's really more layered than that.
Yeah.
Well, Guy, I appreciate your time today. I will let you get back with the family and enjoy the trip. We should definitely do this again. And
yeah, absolutely. I apologize for being late, man. But yeah,
no stress at all. No stress at all.
No, I would love to continue the conversation, and because I there's a mind hack thing in cannabis here, and this notion, and I'm very plant medicine, right? So the MDMA folks, and I know that they just suffered a loss recently, but I remember being on this MAPS panel, or with these MAPS folks, talking about like, oh, the FDA. I'm like, you keep saying that like it's a good thing, and it's like, that's not plant medicine, right? It's like, I don't need to quantify it as an active pharmaceutical ingredient and dig so deeply on what it does, because we're talking about something that is so unique and moving for everybody that you're not going to get the one miracle molecule. That's not how it works. And so I'm all about plant medicine, master plant medicine, starting at cannabis as that over the counter, if you will, and heading all the way up to the ones where you probably need a guided practitioner, that kind of thing.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'd love to chat again, because I do think that what we're doing with cannabis hopefully will usher the way for that different wellness paradigm.
Yep. I agree with that. Well, deep gratitude for you, Guy, for your spirit, your energy, your soul, everything that you bring to the overall community and humanity. And thank you so much for sharing with us today and opening up. And major ups from myself and from the Reality Sound Squad.
Awesome. Thanks, you guys. I'm sure we'll be talking soon.